Palace. Pip pip, tally ho. Joolz Guides here, in which I wander around London telling you fascinating facts. And don't forget, please, to hit the subscribe button if you enjoy these videos, and the little bell, because that will notify you when I upload a new one. And today we're wandering down Whitehall. We're currently standing in Trafalgar Square, but I've got loads of videos about this area. You can watch my other one about the Strand, where I wander along in a different direction. But we're going in that direction, so let's go.
Strolling so
Up until about 1240, this was just a little lane leading from a village called Chadding or something, back in the old days, like 12th century or whatever, all the way down to the Abbey. And there were all these beautiful posh houses down on the river. Later on, after like the 13th century, they were occupied by the Bishop of York. But then, ultimately, when King Henry VIII came along, he could do whatever he liked. So he said, I'm having this lot, and I'm going to turn them into Whitehall Palace, which is where he lived and died, I believe. And it was made of this special white ashlar stone, which hence the name Whitehall Palace. But anyway, wouldn't you know it, in 1698, a Dutch washerwoman, she hung the laundry a bit too close to the fire and it burnt the whole place down. But they never rebuilt it.
gay youth you might have seen, Tomkins and I with his girl between. Then oh, what
it's lovely, this little square, isn't it? So we just look, telephone exchange, quite hidden away. And you may have heard me talk about this, so my older subscribers may have heard Vintage Joolz mention this before, but I just wanted to clear up a couple of things, actually. This house behind me, Earl Harrington had that built in 1702 because he was hoping that Whitehall Palace would be rebuilt. He thought, I know, if that gets rebuilt, then I'll be well in there and I could sort of be close to all these movers and shakers. So poor old Earl Harrington, he ended up with a house which wasn't near the palace after all, because the monarchy moved to places like St James Palace and Kensington Palace and ultimately Buckingham Palace. But actually, look over here. So someone sent me a message the other day asking me what these things are. And I was surprised because I just thought that it was common knowledge. It was obvious what these things are.
Yeah.
You know what they are,
Yeah,
right?
back in the day when everybody had, well, a lot of people had horses.
Yeah.
To scrape your way the...
Yeah, you got muddy boots. You can just sort of take your... But anyway, what's interesting about this is this little alleyway here is the reason why London has pavements or sidewalks, because Earl Harrington was being visited one day by, I think it's called Lord Onslow, he's the Speaker of the House of Commons, and he was coming down this alleyway in his carriage and he got stuck between the buildings and he got very embarrassed. You know, he had to be unceremoniously lifted out through the roof and then he had to walk all the way to the House of Parliament, and he didn't like this. So eventually he said, look, if everyone had curbstones, if people were responsible for pavements outside their building and they had curbstones like this, he would have noticed the street narrowing before it was too late, before he got stuck between these houses. So then an act got passed in Parliament to have pavements, and everyone had to be responsible for the curbstones and the pavements outside their own house, and that was like their property. It's a nice hidden pub. Yeah, it's a nice hidden pub down this street. Never been there before.
Brilliant. You know, I read that this is the only legal brothel in all of London.
Really?
Yeah, the only one. I think they had a royal license in the 16th century, but they never revoked it. So it's still a brothel.
I don't think they actually. I don't think that you can actually go there now, though.
I praise the Conservatives frank and free. Tomkins got angry so speedily. All in a moment he handed to me.
It's hard to believe that we only had the Metropolitan Police from around 1829. It's sort of roughly, you'd think the police went back a lot longer than that, but anyway, from 1829 up until about the 1890s, they were based here in Great Scotland Yard. Great Scott, Marty! Great Scott Holmes! That's what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about. Great Scotland Yard! But now, look, it's been turned into some sort of luxury hotel these days. But they still keep the police horses in here sometimes. You can still see them. It's quite cute, quite nice. It always smells of sort of horse around here. And you probably recognise this whole area from my Harry Potter video, cut to Vintage Joolz and his Harry Potter video. And there's a telephone box just over here in the corner, and they've put up a bridge there in the film. It's not there in real life, but they enter a telephone box which is just about here, I think he dials 62442, which dials magic if you spell it out. And Arthur Weasley says, oh, this should be interesting. I've never used the visitor's entrance before. And they descend down here into the Ministry. And then in the Deathly Hallows Part 1, that corner over there is where Ron is keeping an eye out in the film for Falda Hopkirk, who he's going to zap. And then they drag her over to that gate over there.
Two lovely black eyes. Oh, what a surprise. Only foretelling a man he was wrong.
Now, I'm always getting confused with all these buildings, which are like the Admiralty, because this, the Old Admiralty, is all these buildings around here used to be connected with the Admiralty. And this, I believe, is Admiralty House, which was the residence of the First Lord of the Admiralty. For many years, up until the 1960s, it's actually an 18th century house. People like Winston Churchill used to have a residence there. But the actual one next door is what's now these days known as the Ripley Building, but because that was the name of the architect or something, but that's the oldest part of the whole Old Admiralty complex, which still survives, and that is 18th century. I'll probably have to show you a shot from the other side of the road, because these days you can't see it, but you can see this sort of screen, they call it. This was erected in 1780 by Robert Adam, famous Scottish architect. He put this thing up. I believe that it was somewhere in here, either here or next door, where Lord Nelson's body lay the night before his funeral. So it spent a night here, I think. But anyway, nice building, that. We'll go around to the other side in a minute. You can see more of the Old Admiralty. It's quite a big complex. But that's the nicest part of it. It's a pity you can't really see it properly. But actually, interestingly, over here, let's just go over here, Simon. I've always found this quite fascinating here. I never really, I honestly think it's just literally a table that's been put there for the convenience of people drinking in the pub. But it's just a strange oddity that, you know, I don't really see many of those. But anyway, in a past video, I mentioned this curbstone down here. I don't know if this is true, to be honest, but I read, you see this mark here on the curb? You may have seen this in one of the vintage Joolz guides. That because we were talking about the pavements and how everyone had to be responsible for the curbstones and outside their houses, that because these buildings here all belong to the Admiralty, then they were responsible for the curbstones outside their buildings, and they always stamped their property with the what's it called, that arrowhead, the Admiralty sign, seal. So I read that that's why that has the Admiralty mark on it. But a lot of other people wrote in to me saying, nah, Joolz, you idiots, you damn fool, that's just a stonemason's mark. But anyway, so I don't know. Is it a stonemason's mark? Is it the Admiralty mark? Who knows? Who knows? But I like it. It's a nice story, isn't it? I read somewhere. I love some of the pubs around here, by the way. They're perfectly good. I quite like the Old Shades. I go in there sometimes. It's quite nice, bigger than it looks.
This way than you think.
Yeah, yeah. There's one around that corner that we saw. Good place for a pub crawl, actually. I reckon.
Deposits.
Check deposits from when it used to be a bank. Is it still a bank? I doubt it. The only part of the Whitehall Palace which still survives today is this building here, which is the Banqueting House. And this is the one where famously in 1649, King Charles I, he stepped out of one of those windows there onto a scaffold and had his head chopped off. You know, you can see him there, that's the statue of him up at the top there. Did they say, behold the head of a traitor? I heard a story that it was traditional for the headsman to ask forgiveness. So say, oh, do you forgive me for the duty I have to perform? And apparently he just said no. I think that was what I read. But anyway, look, you can still see his head there. And inside it's got a beautiful ceiling done by Rubens, which you can see in my London Pass video from vintage Joolz, actually. The story goes that because it was January and freezing cold, he didn't want the public to think he was shivering from fear, so he asked for an extra shirt. Right here, amazing to think, really. But this is originally the guardhouse for the King's Lifeguard. These guys are the King's Lifeguard, although I always find it quite amusing because you've got these other guys with guns right next to them who look like they're probably a bit more threatening, but seems to be mostly ceremonial now. But yeah, that clock up there is from 1756. That was the main clock in Westminster up until they built like Big Ben. So they used to go by this clock over here, and that little number you see on the number 2, they say that the little black mark is to commemorate the time of day when King Charles I had his head chopped off over the road there. But I don't know, I suspect that's bollocks. It's probably just some excuse made by somebody who made a smudge on it, I reckon. I don't know. Now look, don't go up to these guys and hassle them. You know, it's not clever. Just leave them. They're doing a good job. I don't know if you saw that lady cycling through. Did you see that lady cycling through just now? She shouldn't have been doing that. Cycling through here is strictly forbidden. Only the king is allowed to like ride through here. It's like you're not allowed to do that. That was cheeky of her. It's amazing seeing pictures of this before the 1750s because this was a lovely red brick building, and originally it was the entrance to Whitehall Palace. But yeah, it dilapidated. So in the 1750s, they built this, and it's based on a drawing which the architect William Kent had. He was the architect of King George II, and he had these drawings in the Palladian style from Lord Burlington, his friend that we talked about, Burlington House, and its Palladian style, this obsession with this style back then. I'm talking as if I'm some sort of expert in architecture. I'm really not. But now it's more like the ceremonial route from Buckingham Palace down to Westminster. They believe they open up those windows when there's trooping the colour. You know, on the King's birthday or something, they do this lovely ceremony here, and members of the royal family can sit up there and watch it all taking place. All very grand, but you're only allowed to go through here in a carriage if you're in the royal family. You're not allowed to cycle through like that lady did earlier on. Now that's the way to do it. He's dismounted from his bicycle, whereas the other lady earlier
because
didn't.
he's not a king.
Yeah, exactly. If you were a member of the royal family, you could go straight through there. And this is where they do the trooping of the colour in this area here, Horseguards parade. That building over there is actually from the early 20th century. But behind it is the Old Admiralty. That's that whole bit there is the Old Admiralty that we were talking about on the other side. That's where in 1781 they conveyed by semaphore a message that Charles Cornwallis had surrendered to George Washington, losing the American Revolutionary War, I guess. That defeat was conveyed from the semaphore station on the top of that building, the old one behind, over to Pall Mall, where Lord Germain's house was. And Lord Germain had to run all the way down to Downing Street to tell Lord North that the troops had surrendered. So obviously all being government buildings, these were heavily targeted in the war, and you can actually see up there on that column, you still see some of the damage done by Jerry back in the Second World War. I don't even see it from here, but yeah, there's some damage from bombs. Actually, it was in the basement here, in room 13. Ian Fleming used to work. It was in room 13 that Operation Mincemeat was planned in the Second World War. I don't know if you've seen that film, Operation Mincemeat, the man who never was, wasn't it? Where they found a tramp and they dressed him up as an officer, and then they threw him into the sea near Spain with all these documents and stuff in order to trick the Germans into thinking that it was an amazing story. And Ian Fleming was quite instrumental in that. His character M in James Bond was actually inspired by his superior officer here, Admiral Godfrey. Amazing stuff.
Lovely black eyes, two lovely black eyes.
Look at this wonderful, this is the old War Office. Once again, it's been taken over by some fancy hotel. But those figures at the top, those represent peace and war, truth and justice, and fame and victory. Those guys up there. It was built around the beginning of the 20th century. And famous Secretary of States for War have had their offices there. Lord Kitchener, you know, your country needs you, that guy. And Profumo, as in the Profumo scandal with Christine Keeler, he had his offices in there. And also T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. The War Office used to be a bunch of buildings further over there on Pall Mall, I think, but there were so many, they required so many messengers to be running backwards and forwards. They said, you know what, let's consolidate this, have it all in one place. So they decided to build this one. In the basement these days, there's something called the Pindar Bunker, which is where Margaret Thatcher conducted affairs for the Falklands War and stuff like that. There's a proper bomb shelter down there. Pindar was a poet in ancient Greece, because when his town of Thebes got completely levelled by Alexander the Great happened to like his poetry, so he said, you know what, let's just leave Pindar's house as the only house standing in the whole of Thebes. So it acquired this significance of being something that can last, you know. Hello. In 1909, they were worried about German spies, and so this is where MI5 started up. It started up as MO5, Military Operations 5 it was called. They only had one person working for it. He was called Captain Vernon Kell. He was staff member 001. Don't know how many spies he caught on his own, but anyway, that's where it started, isn't it?
Only for telling a man he was wrong. Two lovely black eyes.
Oh, look at that. Look, it's clouded over. They're relaying the road, honestly. It's all back. Anyway, that's the Minstry of Defence, well, at least it was. I think it is. My eyesight's going. Nicholas Pevener, he described this as being a monument of tiredness. Originally, it was the Department of Trade back in the 30s when they built that building. That's supposed to be earth and water, I think, those figures by Sir Charles Wheeler, famous sculptor. Well, I mean, they're quite nice, actually. I quite like that style. I know, it's kind of a little bit Soviet. Do you know what I mean? Something about those.
It's like something you find in Tim Burton's Batman. That kind of
yes.
Batman.
Yeah, I feel like.
Look.
What's interesting about it, so obviously this all used to be the Palace of Whitehall. They're redeveloping or something, and they discovered King Henry VIII's wine cellar underneath, and they wanted to preserve it. And it's really beautiful, but they managed, because it was slightly in the way, they managed to move this whole wine cellar, which is like a cellar. I mean, with these lovely vaulted ceiling and everything, and they moved it like 8 feet or something. The whole thing. It must have been a really complicated undertaking. But anyway, directly behind the Ministry of Defence, you see these stairs. They're called Queen Anne's Steps. They were retained from the old Whitehall Palace. So, you know, back in the days before Sir Joseph Bazalgette with his big moustache came along and he built the embankment here. So the river used to originally come all the way up to here. And then they took the river all the way back and they dug the sewers underneath here and the district line and stuff. But originally you used to be able to come out of Whitehall Palace and down these steps and onto a boat. This is originally from the old Whitehall Palace before 1698 when it burnt down. Because they knocked down a lot of it, you know, after it was just like demolished and stuff. They may have changed it because somewhere around here, all these ministry for this, ministry for that. I think the ministry for silly walks is somewhere over here. See this, actually. If you look around the other side where it doesn't have a splodge on it. I know they both have splodges on. St Martin in the Fields, I wish I knew, because you get these lampposts up in Fleet Street, just outside the Royal Courts of Justice. They've got the same. And maybe someone can write in and tell me why it says St Martin in the Fields, because I know that the parish of St Martin in the Fields is pretty close to here, and this might still be encompassed by that, but surely it didn't stretch all the way up to the Royal Courts of Justice. Anyway, maybe it did, so if someone can tell me why that says St Martin in the Fields, I'll be all ears. And meanwhile, in our Piccadilly video, we had a sneaky peek inside a couple of little London clubs, well, the RAC anyway, but we didn't actually manage to go inside properly. But as luck would by lucky hap, we've been invited to go to the National Liberal Club, which is just down here. So let's go.
Next time I argued, I thought it best to give the Conservative side a rest. The merits of Gladstone I freely pressed when, oh, what a surprise.
Hello, look at that, what a lovely welcome. We don't usually get welcomed like that. Normally it's like, stop filming, what are you doing? Lovely to see you.
Nice to see you
You're
again.
Derek.
Derek, yeah.
Derek.
Brilliant, Kate.
Kate, how nice to see you.
And you too. Thank you for dropping by. Well, it was founded in 1882 by Gladstone.
Right.
As
William
a-
Gladstone, the
Correct.
Prime Minister.
Correct.
Right.
A meeting place for all the Liberal Party members to be able to come to London and meet here. And obviously that has changed over the subsequent decades. Our tagline is, we're the most inclusive club in London. It's the first London gentlemen's club to actually admit women.
This is an interesting painting. This is Gladstone's first cabinet, with all his cabinet members, and on the bottom of the frame you can see their names. But there's one person in the painting whose name isn't listed below, and he only appeared when the painting was restored. We're not sure who it is, but we believe the artist snuck Benjamin Disraeli into the portrait.
That one. Oh yeah, he does.
Completely photoshopped.
It looks like he's a mannequin, like a ventriloquist's dummy, doesn't it? He's holding him. It's hilarious. So Gladstone is this fella sitting down, is he?
Right. And you'll see a lot of Gladstone throughout the club.
What a staircase!
So this staircase is featured in many TV series.
Oh, really?
Downton Abbey, Lady Mary was walking up here.
Excellent.
It's been in The Crown.
Oh, yeah.
Also Foyle's War.
And now it's in Joolz Guides. So basically, anyone, no, not anyone can become. Can I become
Yes,
a member?
you can, my darling.
We're not very political on Joolz
Well, no,
Guides.
you don't need to be. So we accept people from all political persuasions.
Really? Can Neil Kinnock join if he wants? Sure.
He absolutely can, but
He probably doesn't want to.
all we ask from our members is that you're liberal in the true sense of the word.
Right.
So that's
Small L.
Small L. But obviously we do have a swathe of political members.
Who's this the bloke?
Dadabhai Naoroji from Mumbai, who's a member of parliament, who's a member of this club, who's on the members' council. Obviously, very liberal club, allowing a diverse membership, in fact, diverse leadership, in the 1890s.
What's the point in being a member here? What's so good about it?
Well, we have a plethora of clubs, circles and forums. Everything that you can possibly think of, from Authors Club to the Wine Circle, Business Forum, so basically anything that you are interested in. Here's the lady herself, Lady Violet.
Related to Helena Bonham Carter.
Well, she was Asquith to begin with,
Okay.
and then she was married into the Bonham Carter family. So for dinners, small lunches, we've had fashion shows in here, we have music concerts.
It's also a great place to have a wedding.
Can you hire these?
You can
So
hire
I
them.
can book this for my
You could
birthday.
Book this
You
for your
can,
birthday.
Hey, I might.
But it might be
there are
worthwhile
other
for you to
spaces.
join as a member first, and then you get a better rate.
The chap I had met was a Tory true. Nothing the Liberals' right could do. This was my share of that argument too. Two lovely black eyes.
I love these pillars. Look at this.
But on New Year's Eve, this is where you want to be, my friends, because if you want to just turn around here, Simon, and you'll see our terrace.
Oh wow! Look at this. See now, this is what. But look at it! What a fantastic terrace.
It's huge. And of course, on New Year's Eve, when all this, the barges with all the fireworks, this is prime location to watch them. So we have a huge New Year's Eve bash. So imagine summertime, imagine a balmy summer July afternoon, glass of rosé.
Yeah. How do you join here?
There's an application form on our website.
Yeah.
You can complete it online. You need to have a proposer and a seconder.
And if you don't
Fantastic,
know
but-
anybody at the club,
Yeah.
the office will set you up with a member to take you on a tour of the club and determine if you're a person of good character and pure liberal values.
Yes, I'll put the links below, of course.
We are closed at the weekend.
So it's not open on the weekends. Does that mean that you get to go to other clubs in reciprocal?
It does indeed.
That's quite
We have typical
handy, because
arrangements
that-
with other clubs at the weekend.
Right. So you can go to, for example, the Oriental Club,
Indeed.
and on a weekend and go and have one of their excellent curries.
I mean, you can literally plan your holidays around our reciprocal clubs.
Absolutely.
Slightly different
last
from
year I
my
went to
usual
the
backpacking trip. And
Royal,
Isn't
the
it?
Royal Bombay Yacht Club. We did
Simon, you see yourself in the Royal Bombay Yacht Club?
Two lovely black eyes. Oh, what a surprise! Only for telling a man he was wrong.
This, you may not realise this. This is a Beckman bin. I know a Beckman bin when I see one.
okay, why do you know? Tell me.
I've seen these in all the London clubs actually, and look, because it's got leather around there and this
Right.
ring, and there's a very high likelihood that I made this bin, or my brother made it, or one of my brother's friends, because Mrs. Beckman used to employ us in her bin factory down in Golders Green, and she was a family friend, and we had. Honestly, the amount of these leather things we had to pull on there and glue one of those on, and I haven't seen them anywhere else in London except in these clubs. It's so funny that
Darling, it's become full circle. There we
she
go.
called them artistic furnishing accessories. Actually, yeah.
What did you call them?
Boom.
It's last orders.
time of King Henry VIII, this had a tennis court, it had a bowling alley, cockpits, all sorts of things like that on that side. That's seen better days, hasn't it? Look at that.
Compared to this one.
Well, you know what? I wonder if that's from people tying things onto it.
Oh, possibly.
Could be. Could be. This Dover house here was built in 1758. It was owned by the Melbourne family. It's called William Lamb, Viscount Melbourne. He went on to be Prime Minister, actually. An awful racist, actually. He was really against the abolition of slavery. He was the one who married Lady Caroline Lamb, who was obsessed with Lord Byron. So Lady Caroline Lamb, who sent her pubic hair to Lord Byron in the post, she was married to this William Lamb, but she didn't like him, and she was more into Lord Byron. Anyway, this is where she lived and suffered from mental health issues and other health problems. Eventually, in 1884, it was offered to William Gladstone, the Liberal Prime Minister. He didn't want it. He thought it might mean that people expected him to be more sociable, which he didn't really want. I can understand that. And so now it's been offered to the government's Scottish office. That's why you can see the Scottish flag at the top.
The moral you've caught I can hardly doubt. Never on politics rave.
I've always liked this monument here. The women of World War II. There's lots of monuments along here, all famous war heroes and goodness knows what. But I like that. It's really evocative, you know?
Yeah, it's a bit creepy.
Yeah, it's creepy. But I suppose it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a jolly monument, is it, really?
No.
And further along there, you've got the Cenotaph.
Yes.
Don't look, Simon, don't look. What 3 words appear on the Cenotaph? It's a great quiz question, that. It's a great quiz question.
The Glorious Dead.
Well, you're looking. You're cheating. Anyway, look. Cenotaph comes from the Greek, meaning empty tomb. The shape of it is a tomb on the top. You can see it's like a big tomb. So this is where everyone stops to pay their respects on Remembrance Sunday, the 11th of November every year. And you can see there on the side, they've got the flags. I think the one on the left is a Royal Air Force ensign, probably. Middle one, Union flag, and then red ensign on the right, probably naval. I'm a doctor, not a scientist, damn it, Jim. But this was designed by Edwin Lutyens back in 1919 when they had this parade after the First World War. They wanted the soldiers to have somewhere to stop and salute. And he designed it originally, it was in wood, actually, but they liked it so much that they decided to make a proper one out of stone. I think it's appropriate, isn't it? It's not too ornate, it's sort of kind of austere, as it's supposed to be.
Leave it to others to fight it out, if you would be wise.
Amazing, isn't it? Downing Street here. It's number 10 Downing Street. Those designed by Sir Christopher Wren, 1600s sometime. They were built for Sir George Downing, who was Secretary to the Treasury, and the second person to graduate from Harvard University in 1642. And then later in 1732, it became like the official residence of the Prime Minister. The first Prime Minister was Robert Walpole. And in the time of King George I, he had to communicate with King George I in schoolboy Latin, because King George I was German, so the only language they had in common was notque est in omnibus. Anyway, you know, it's funny, you see the black bricks there. They actually cleaned the house and they scrubbed off all the soot and everything and discovered that actually the bricks underneath are yellow. Originally those are yellow bricks, but it was decided that didn't look very prime ministerial. It didn't look very, no one would recognise it as number 10 Downing Street. So they've actually coloured them black again. So that's just painted black. Famous occupant was Arthur Balfour in 1902. He was the first Prime Minister to use a motor car. And his uncle was the previous Prime Minister, Robert Gascoigne Cecil, or Bob Gascoigne Cecil. That's where we get Bob's your uncle from. He gave his nephew a job as Secretary of State for Ireland or something, or I don't know, some important position in government. And he didn't have any real qualifications for the role. I mean, I don't know how good he was at it. So everyone just thought, oh, well, it's basically because your uncle is Bob Gascoigne Cecil. So they said, you know, if anyone asked, how do you get the job? Well, Bob's your uncle. Bob's your uncle. That's how you get the job. Hence, Bob's your uncle. Fanny's your aunt. Don't know where that comes from. Now, this fella over here looks like he knows all about this area. Okay. You work around here, right?
I do, yeah. I worked for 3 years in that building behind you.
This is, in fact, Jimmy McGloughlin, whose podcast I've been invited to appear on, finally.
Yeah, so I worked in 10 Downing Street as the Prime Minister's Special Advisor on Business.
Yeah.
And I always used to think Downing Street 10 Downing Street is probably the world's most famous address. Might not be the most famous building in the world, but it's probably the most famous address.
Why, for example, are there now gates on here?
Yeah.
Because in Day of the Jackal, I'm pretty sure that he rides up there on a bicycle or something.
Well, you could do that till the early 90s, but then it was hit by a bomb by the IRA, and so security was all made a lot tighter around here. So that's when they put the gates on, and you needed a pass to get in there and so on.
So who was in the hot seat when you were...
Theresa May was the Prime Minister when I was there.
Oh, right.
And it's funny you mentioned the hot seat, because the term originates from Downing Street. So there are no keys to Downing Street. So if you ever hear somebody say, will Keir Starmer win the keys to Downing Street?
Right.
You know they don't know what they're talking about. There's no keys. So there had to be a police officer outside.
Oh, yes, there's always a policeman, yeah.
And obviously it could be really, really cold some days. And so the way they got around this was they had a big seat which had basically like a hood that came over the top of it. But they used to put coals underneath it to keep them warm. And that's where the phrase "in the hot seat" comes from.
Really? And tell me about there's the zero on the door.
Yes, the zero's wonky.
It's a bit like when people type an O instead of a zero on a typewriter.
Yeah, exactly that. There are also 3 black doors that sort of interchangeably get changed. So you can go and give one a polish if the US President or the Queen is coming.
But why don't they change the O? Just because they like it that way?
Yeah, I think so. It's like tradition, right? Yeah. But this is where ministers don't like coming around sometimes, because the press will wait here and try and pop people with questions. So that's sometimes where you've got to be very careful with what notes you're leaving with. And that quite often happens that the snappers are there and we'll take a picture of you.
And then zoom in and you can see.
Yeah.
Wow, you mentioned coals. Sorry, I digress. But I'm a bit obsessed with these things. This is a coal hole cover, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think it's a coal hole cover. It might be for something else. It's a bit bigger, isn't it? It was made in March the 16th, 1854. I bet you this is shrapnel from the wall. Look, these holes and stuff in the wall. That's got to be from bombs, isn't it?
Better, far better it is to let Liberals and Tories alone, you bet, unless you're willing and anxious to get to lovely black
Thanks, Jimmy. So, well, I suppose that calls for a drink. Where is a typical place that we should finish our video?
Well,
where would politicians go?
The Red Lion is probably the most famous pub in Westminster on Derby Gate. Been here since the 1400s.
It's more or less opposite Downing Street.
Exactly that.
So the Prime Ministers go in there and stuff?
Yeah, sometimes. Definitely. When MPs start, it's one of the first places that people come and so on. Yeah, I'm pretty sure every Prime Minister's probably drunk here. Yeah, they've done it through the ages, right?
Well, I say we go in and have a pint.
Definitely, let's do it.
2 lovely black eyes. Oh, what a surprise.
Look at that, there's been a pub here since 1435. I mean, not this one, obviously, but this is the latest incarnation. And yeah, so inside they've got this division bell, which is the one that rings, because so many politicians drink in there. That's why they're a bit funny about us filming in there. So they have this bell that rings to remind them to go and vote in the House of Commons. So it's called the division bell. I think now these days they've got an electric one, but it used to be a kind of proper one. Anyway, look, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you like the videos, and to hit the little bell, and go over to my website joolzguys.com where you can buy merchandise. Cheers, Simon. Cheers everybody. See you next time.
Only for telling a man he was wrong. 2 lovely